Welcome to the Chaos Whispers of Healthcare, the podcast for busy healthcare leaders who are ready to get out of survival mode so they can focus on what matters most. This is where the burnout stops and the real talk starts. I'm your host, Dr. Megan Carter, and each week I sit down with healthcare innovators who get it. We will unpack the chaos, laugh through the hard stuff, and get you at least 2 practical tips you can use at work right away. If you're ready to clear the chaos and lead with impact, you've come to the right place. Let's jump in. Welcome back to the Chaos Whispers of Healthcare, the podcast for busy healthcare leaders who are done with overwhelming workloads and burnout. This podcast is built around the big idea that you are not meant to prove your worth through exhaustion. We help you get out of survival mode by discussing your real-world pain points and giving you at least 2 practical tips you can put in place right away. Today's guest is someone I have been admiring and following on LinkedIn for quite some time. She always posts these timely insights that hit me as an ACNO and now as a nurse leader turned entrepreneur. Lori Smith is the CEO and executive coach at Elevating Healthcare Leadership Impact, where she leverages her 25 years of healthcare leadership experience to guide today's C-suite healthcare leaders with the help of her coaching team. She currently works with teams nationally and globally. She's been a nurse manager, a director, a CNO, and a system CNO, so she truly understands what it's like to face the challenges of today's healthcare leaders. Lori is a certified coach through the International Coaching Federation. She's also certified in brain-based coaching. She's currently working toward her PhD as well in organizational psychology. Welcome to the show, Lori.
Thank you for having me, Megan. I've been looking forward to this.
Same. I'm so excited. So the first question I like to ask the guests is usually challenging for them to answer because of the many years of memories they have to pull from. But what has been your most chaotic moment in healthcare leadership?
Oh my gosh, my most chaotic moment was years. And it had to be through COVID, right? It felt like a chaotic moment because it was a time warp. We blinked and these years of our life were gone. While it was chaotic, there are so many tools that I gained and learned and grew from through that experience. We wouldn't wish it on our worst enemy, but when we look back, if we can view it as an opportunity for growth rather than being stuck in victimhood, that's a hard thing to do and a hard place to get to, but one of the ways that you try to make good out of something that was so terrible.
Yeah. Do you remember any specific moment during the pandemic that really hit you as, okay, this is bad? Yeah.
I do actually. It happened on a number of occasions, but those moments where we had patients in conference rooms, when we had patients in spaces that weren't being utilized that now became patient care areas, the resource allocation and figuring out how to do the best that we could with what we had at the time, and sort of polarization of what we've been taught and had held so dearly with quality and safety over the years. And the fact that felt like it was going into a wood chipper at times and we were doing something wrong when we were just trying to do the best we could for the patients. Those are the moments I think I remember the most.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've told people this before, but I think my moment was because I was in Kentucky at the time. So it hit that northern hemisphere before it hit Texas, where I eventually moved. And we ran out of ventilators in the first 2 weeks in February of 2020. But I think for me, like the real, oh my gosh, this is uncharted territory was I was admin on call and the house soup said, we have so many bodies piled up in the ED, our morgue can't hold them. What do you think about getting a refrigerated food truck?
Mm-hmm.
I'm hearing that that's a thing. And it was like, do I approve that? I guess I'm thinking of all the state and federal laws and regulations, but at that point there was all of that went right out the window. It was literally, you just did, like you said, in the conference room, putting patients in there. You did whatever you needed to do to survive and to keep people as safe as you could. So wild, wild time. No doubt. Yeah. So I know you've been a CNO and a system CNO. That was your most recent role. I'm always curious, what inspired you to leave that system CNO role and step into the entrepreneur journey as a coach?
That's been fun to reflect on over the years as I think about that, because I loved my CNO role. I absolutely loved it. And I didn't leave because I was disenchanted with the role and what I was doing. In fact, I had planned on retiring in that role. What changed for me was the fact that I had an executive coach throughout COVID, and the impact that she had for me was absolutely transformational. And I started to become a certified executive coach while I'm still a systems CNO with the goal of providing better leadership to my team. I had tried every trick in the book that I could with the skills that I had learned over the course of 20 years. And still, there was more that I could have been doing. And this was one of those ways that I was exploring that. And as I started to see those techniques have an impact for team, I started using some of those techniques with a CEO and a CNO in Germany who we had been partnered with through Magnet for Europe. And when I saw the impact it was having for their team, I thought, this might be something that we've been missing in nursing and healthcare leadership for so many years. Why are we not doing more of this? And I had the honor of being on the AONL System C&E subcommittee. And what a great resource to do a pulse check and see, what's out there. What are people facing? What do they wish they had? And there were about 30 people in that group. I certainly identified that there was a gap with what we were all missing. And that's kind of the short story of it. As I started to investigate things a little bit more, I decided that's it. I'm diving into this full time and I'm giving this 100% of my energy, not doing consulting, sticking straightly with coaching as the number one focus. And within 18 months of launching, we were fully booked. That tells you the hunger that we have out there for this kind of support for our teams right now.
Absolutely. I love that your story, it's so often I hear the healthcare leaders pivot into innovation or entrepreneur space because they themselves had a need, someone helped them with it, and they want to, pay it forward, that gift to others. So I love that you shared that so beautifully. Thank you for that. Let's talk about maybe some of the pain points our listeners are facing, and then we can pivot to the solutions. So we know today's healthcare leaders are facing multiple challenges, right? Many of which have grown in complexity and pace, especially the last couple of years. And I know I hear they often report feeling overwhelmed in these national surveys. How would you describe mental overwhelm, and how is it impacting healthcare leaders from your perspective?
That's such a great question. Absolutely, critical thinking and decision making is being impacted by overwhelm, right? I mean, if we think about times when we've been utterly overwhelmed, our capacity for stepping back and critically thinking and having a highly effective decision making mental model is impacted. It's very different when we take a step back and we think about that. I am frequently working with teams where time management, prioritization, delegation is a hard one. No one wants to delegate right now because everyone is feeling the stretch and the burn. And what does that look like, though, to have the opportunity to grow through delegation? Someone trusted us by delegating, and that's how we learned and we grew. But that overwhelm and time management go hand in hand. What I frequently see is leaders who either print their calendar or have an electronic copy of it. And I've been guilty of this myself.
Yeah.
And we follow it like a roadmap,
Yeah.
not questioning it, right? And if we look back, many of those meetings could have been an email, or those meetings could have been a quick conversation, or they didn't need to have multiple members of our team there. This is where trust and psychological safety and interdependence really come into play. And so when I coach teams and individuals, I use the analogy of thinking about your time and energy as finite and as an energy dollar, right? You have $1 to spend with your energy, and you can spend 30 cents of it or 60 cents of it over here. But at the end of the day, then you have 40 cents left for accountability, assignments, follow up, your family, your self-care, your mental health. That time and energy isn't an infinite free flow. It is finite. And we have to really think about where we're spending that precious resource of time and energy.
Yeah. I love that you described that. And as you know, the calendar and the meetings are one of the first places I've started as I've grown my company, is because it is so common. And you're right, our default, and even the way our calendars are programmed, when you go to create a meeting invite, it defaults to a full hour, first of all. And very few people actually stop and ask, does it need to be a full hour? And then for some reason, here's my 2 cents. I don't have national data on this, but it's almost like we fear when we're creating the meeting invite, we're afraid of not including somebody because we're afraid they're going to be insulted.
It's true.
It's ironically, it would be the greatest gift ever you could give someone is to not bring them to the meeting, right? But we're so trained to be so focused on the team dynamic. So I love that you brought that up. I know you mentioned time management, and I know for a lot of these leaders, time can often feel like the enemy, especially for those who are absorbing more and more responsibility as these orgs are reducing their workforce and they're collapsing these leadership structures. So what do you believe are the biggest barriers to effective time management for these leaders?
Um, Absolutely. There's a theme of this fear of micromanaging versus accountability and a reluctance to delegate for sure. As we have those conversations, particularly around micromanaging versus accountability, it's been really interesting. Sometimes we feel like we're doing the right thing, and in fact, we're getting the opposite result that we're intending to accidentally. I'm currently coaching a leader who's a phenomenal, top-notch leader, and she's working toward not micromanaging and giving a little space, really promoting that autonomy and growth in individuals. And stepped back to say, well, when do you think you could have this to me? The other individual said, yeah, I could get that to you soon. And she's like, great, soon is great. Well, in that individual's mind, soon was within 30 days. And in her mind, soon was next week. So coming back the following week to say, hey, where are we at with this? Then the other person perceives this as micromanaging. Hey, I thought you were giving me the time and the space to be able to do this. So Brene Brown, when she states clear is kind, that could not be a more true statement. Who is accountable for what by when is not micromanaging. That is creating a clear plan forward. And really trusting in your team to let them stretch and grow a little bit for that succession planning. People are very interested in progressing in leadership currently. There are challenging spots for sure, but we still have folks that want to grow professionally. And part of that is pulling them into the work so that they are prepared to move to that next level.
That's such a great example. And of course, I love Brene Brown, big fan. When you mentioned the deliverables, it reminded me of, I think it was when I was a director, maybe that healthcare system. We had this lean management group come in and help us, streamline our meetings and do all the things. And what they did, one of the things they did that I still use today with my clients is instead of taking like these full 20-page minutes from these meetings that nobody's reading, they actually use a tool called the 3 Ws. Like you just said, the who, the what, and the when. It's who owns the deliverable, what is the deliverable, and what is the date. And what was interesting as people were starting to adopt it is people were coming to the meeting prepared with their report out or whatever their deliverable was. And because we would repeat it before we ended that current meeting, we said, okay, Megan, you've got this deliverable to do by whenever. That was an opportunity for that person to negotiate that deliverable and that date. Like, is that even realistic? Like, speak now or forever hold your peace. So what we were finding is we were driving outcomes faster. Like our turnaround time was so much less just because, like you said, clear as kind. We were just naming the deliverables out loud. So I love that. That's such a great example. So let's also pivot to some other practical strategies. I know you've got a whole toolbox full of them, but what are some of the strategies you recommend to your clients to help them with mental overwhelm and with time management?
I would love to tell you that we could do a quick session and things are on track. But the honest truth is that the brain works in mysterious ways, right? 95% of what we do is unconscious because we've built those neural pathways. And if the brain was having to actively think about every breath we took, every word we used, every step we made, it would be exhausted. It would burn through glucose faster than it would have to supply for, right? And so how do we really uncover some of those things to consciously think about how we're shifting those neural pathways? It's called neuroplasticity. And that takes habit formation over time. It doesn't happen overnight. This is why we work with teams over the course of 12 months, is to really be able to do that deep dive. And the first step to do is that self-awareness and that self-assessment of, okay, where are my blind spots? Where are my biases? Where are my opportunities for improvement? And when you start to uncover some of those things and work on those pieces, it begins to fall in place. Then that next step is, what does it look like when we bring this together as a team? What is my part in this team? What is our part together as a team? That psychological safety and trust. How do we become comfortable with mining for conflict rather than avoiding conflict? Not all conflict is a bad thing. When I query teams and I say, what is the first word that comes to mind when I say conflict? We often have a negative association with that, right?
Yeah.
Bad, it's scary, it's stressful. When really conflict is part of our superpower. It's what makes us stronger as a team. We should have differing views and opinions. I used
Yeah.
to tell groups that I worked with, if I look around the room and I see nothing but head nodding in agreement, I know I'm on the wrong path. I know I'm heading down a dangerous path because I'm not always right. And I know we have a great diversity of thought in this room. If we're not leveraging that, then I'm doing something wrong as a leader. How do we get people comfortable with having those opposing views? And
Yeah.
then shifting into, what does change leadership look like? And then at the end, how do we get and sustain those results? Sometimes teams want to jump to results first, and you've got to put that footwork in for the foundation before you get the results that you're looking for.
Yeah. I love that. And it begs the question too of, so they go through this incredible program and you're there and you're giving them the tools and the self-assessment and then the tools as they go. Are there any strategies that you're giving them along the way that sort of address, okay, I have the best intentions of doing these things, but then real life happens, right? I get a crisis, a water main break, or phones go down, like real life is happening. How do you help your clients stay on track with some of these new habits?
Yeah. That is the easiest place to derail, right? Is once you slip away from those habits, then it's hard to get back on track. I think in the book Atomic Habits, the author mentions that if you miss one day, it's a miss of one day. If you miss 2 days, now it's a habit. Now it's a pattern.
Yeah.
And so it's okay for us to slip up and it's okay for us to have to deviate from those routines. It happens, life happens. But how do you keep yourself accountable for moving forward? And part of what we do through EHLI is formulating these small peer to peer coaching groups. So groups of 4 or 5 and talking through what were our successes over this last month? What were the barriers we experienced? What was getting in our way? How do we support one another? Because it takes a team to get through this. We can't carry the load by ourselves. And that's where establishing that team interdependence really comes in for a support for that longevity and sustainability.
I imagine that's probably also the other benefit of the groups, the smaller groups coming together is it is, and I know clinicians get it, but until you do the work, it gets so lonely and isolating. The higher up you go in that org chart. And I think I know one of the most powerful benefits of having these group sessions, whether it's through a fellowship, a residency, or the coaching, is just getting to hear from other folks who are walking in your shoes, also facing the real realities and sharing that and connecting and networking, because you can't be buddies with your direct reports. There's not a social component to when you're especially at that high level, that system level of leadership. So if I had to guess, I would assume that you're getting some good feedback about it's just really nice to be seen, heard, and valued by peers that get it, that understand the work that we're doing.
That is one of the number one things that we hear with executive coaching, particularly with CNOs, CMOs, COOs, CEOs across the US. It is lonely and it is hard to have some of these challenging conversations with your peers. Number one, time is a
Right.
barrier.
Right.
Number two, people want to be able to ask for questions without feeling silly,
Yeah.
without feeling like they're going to get a political bias. An external executive coach has no skin in the game,
Yeah.
right? With
Yeah.
regard to that political bias. And they'll get sometimes answers they like and sometimes answers they don't like from their executive coach.
Yeah.
Very different when you've got an external perspective and somebody that you can lean on.
Yeah.
And I've got folks that call me in between our scheduled coaching sessions to say, hey, I am heading into this really challenging conversation. I've got to talk through this and what my approach is going to be. Or I just came out of this really challenging conversation. I don't know what to do with myself. I need to talk through this. And that's where that support and not feeling so lonely, as you mentioned, really comes into play with a coach.
Yeah. I hear you describing too, Lori, the humanity of it, of leadership, because what I see so often too, and I talk about this in my workshops, is, our frontline clinicians who are doing the sacred work, there is this they mindset, right? And I think it just stems from, I don't know if it's we socialize it or if it comes with our training, whatever it is, but it's potentiated on social media. There's we, the clinical folks, and they being administration. I used to be one of those people. I hate to admit it, but I was. I was very anti-leadership, whatever, as a clinician, until I actually stepped in their shoes and experienced what they were experiencing. And so what I remind a lot of folks in these workshops too is that leader is a human as well. They're a partner, a parent, a caregiver, rock fan, like whatever it is. They're a whole person outside of here too. You're only seeing a glimpse of them and you're only seeing the job title, but there's a human being behind there. And I think so much of our conflict between these levels is we forget that there's a whole human being involved in this. So I love that you give them that space to connect with each other like that. That's amazing.
Yeah, that is a really fantastic point. And I experienced some of that myself as a leader. My mom was dying from terminal ovarian cancer, and I was in the emergency department. She had intractable vomiting. And I was bringing her back to a room. We had waited in the waiting room, and the nurse was bringing us into the exam room. And another nurse actually caught me in the hallways and said, "Hey, Lori, I've got to talk to you about the schedule." And I've got tears streaming down my face. and you're right. People forget sometimes that we're a human with human issues and things that we're dealing with. And we care deeply, incredibly deeply about our teams. And at the same time, we're dealing with a lot of the same issues.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just that reminder for folks, I think there's a lot of conflict that would be solved if people could just maintain that perspective with each other. So I think that's beautiful. That's amazing. Well, I know that work is certainly a big part of our lives, especially in leadership, but it's not our whole life, as we've talked about. And we all need to be able to experience joy and laughter, especially outside of work. So I always ask my guests, where are you going to get laughter in your life right now?
Oh my gosh. I have been so fortunate in my life to have a group of friends that I have been friends with since childhood. And we all just came together in Phoenix and had a weekend and laughed and relaxed and had a great time. And that is such a cup filler. Having friends in work and outside of work is part of our key to being adaptable and resilient, I think.
I love that. And it's funny, I think you're the first guest on season 2 now. When I ask this question, most people mention either social media or something digital. You're the first person to mention an in real life connection, because I think it's because it's hard for people to get together, especially if you're all across the country. That's maybe a once a year deal. So I love that you made time for that and you guys were able to have that good time together. That's amazing.
Yeah. We were California to DC and Arizona to Montana. So we literally had the map pretty much covered when we all came
that.
Yeah.
Love that. That's amazing. Well, if our listeners want to connect with you further, Lori, maybe they want to check out your services, where can they find you?
They can find me at lorileeleadership.com or email me directly at lori@lorileeleadership.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn.
I love it. And I'll include the links to Lori's connection and all those platforms in the show notes, you guys. Lori, thank you so very much for taking the time to be on the show today. I learn something new every time you and I talk. And I know this conversation will be so impactful for the leaders who need to hear it most. Each of Lori's strategies and tips can also be found in the show notes. And until next time, Chaos Whispers, I hope you have an amazing week.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us on the Chaos Whispers of Healthcare. If today's episode resonated with you, please be sure to follow this podcast, rate, and leave a review on your favorite platform. I'm Dr. Megan Carter, and I will be back next week with more real talk, fresh strategies, and guests who are redefining what it means to lead with impact. Want to keep the conversation going? Be sure to connect with me on LinkedIn and download free tools and resources from my website. Both links are in the show notes. Let's heal this broken healthcare system together, one day at a time.